It's Saturday, so that means the biggest day of the week for real estate. But these, as we know, are very different times. Joining me live from REA Group, Economist Anne Flaherty. And how has Australia's property market performed over winter? We're in the final days of winter. What is the Anne Flaherty report card?
Well, overall, it's been a very strong winter season. Now, despite lockdowns, Sydney has seen the strongest property price growth in the country. Year on year, we've seen growth of just shy of 20% in Greater Sydney, which is the fastest rate of growth that we've seen in the country. Behind New South Wales, Tasmania has been the next best performing state, with both the Greater Hobart region and also regional Tasmania recording price growth of around 15.5%. Now, while Sydney seems to be impervious to the impact of lockdowns, in Melbourne we've seen prices impacted a little more. So price growth in Melbourne was actually the slowest of any of the capital cities, a modest 10%, which in a historical context is extremely strong price growth, but in the current climate is lagging the other cities. Now, one of the reasons for this is we know that Melbourne's real estate restrictions are stricter than Sydney's, for example. So physical property inspections have been off the table for a lot of winter. You know, Melbourne's now in its third lockdown this winter. Having said that, regional Victoria has benefited from Melbourne's lockdowns. We've seen very strong price growth in regional Victoria. It's outpaced, looking just at the last 3 months, property price growth in regional Victoria has outpaced by about 3 times the city itself. In New South Wales as well, actually, we've seen regional price growth of about double what we saw in Greater Sydney over just that winter period.
And it has been interesting, hasn't it, the winter, but spring is looking very different. We've seen announcements throughout the course of the week from the federal government, from the various state governments, that things will open up throughout the spring. So how are you looking at that?
Yeah, well, it's a very difficult sort of to assess exactly what's going to happen. I mean, typically we see things ramp up in spring. We see more vendors bring their properties to market for sale. But this spring, you know, there's still a lot of uncertainty about what restrictions are going to look like, and there might still be a lot of uncertainty amongst people who are thinking about selling. So one of the major drivers of price growth over winter was the fact that we had more buyers than sellers. So demand was outstripping supply, pushing prices up. If we continue to see that over spring, that will support further price growth.
What are your thoughts going forward, Anne, as we look from spring into summer and the phases that the government talks about? Obviously, one of those phases means people are going to come back into the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that what we've seen this year is that demand has stayed strong. And, we're continuing to see properties sell at record speeds. I think, if you look at Tasmania, for example, that's been a very big story this past year. And perhaps of all the states, that's the one that's seen the largest imbalance, if you like, between demand versus supply. We've got properties selling there in just a week, just 7 days. So we're going to continue to see properties sell at very fast speeds if we don't see that supply of people bringing their properties to market for sale.
And we're continuing to see a lot of people wanting tree changes, sea changes. Of course, the cities have been difficult places to live in on the East Coast over the past year and a half.
Absolutely. And I think that regional population growth is a big part of the story. We know from the ABS's latest figures that we've actually hit a record high for the number of Australians who have moved from capital cities into regional areas. Net regional migration is at a record high. Now, with lockdowns around in Melbourne and Sydney, or Victoria and New South Wales, I should say, another thing we're probably going to continue to see is really strong population growth into Queensland. So a lot of people from the southern states have moved north over the past 12 months. With these lockdowns continuing, we're likely to continue to see that trend, which will support price growth in particularly those scenic areas of Queensland. Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, which have seen really strong price growth over this winter.